faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of County Supervisor in Pinal County District 4, of which I'm about to enter. So help me God. That's my promise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our candidates for the Supervisor District 4 race. Thank you very much for joining us. And you will come just to the front of the stage. We'll take some pictures. We'll take a short break before we get into the sheriff's race.
All right, this is the third and final portion of our debate for today. This is for the Pinal County Sheriff's race. With us today, we have all 7 candidates. Mr. Murray will be given time to speak at the end. He is the independent candidate. We also have with us Glenn Millsaps from Coolidge, one of the 2 Democrats. We have Kevin Taylor of Maricopa, the other Democrat. We also have 4 Republicans in the race. At the far right, we have Paul Babeu. Next one, Jack McClaren. Arnson. And Tom Bearup. The format will basically follow the same thing that we had for our 2 previous debates. We'll start out with a round of questions for all the candidates, and then we did have the candidates submit questions to us to be asked of one another, and we'll get to those towards the end. The candidates will then be given 3 minutes at the very end for their closing speeches at the podium, and then finally we will have Ty Morgan, the independent, come up and give a 5-minute speech, and that will conclude the presentation for today. With that, we'll start with a question from Christian Evans.
To make it easy on me, we'll just go left to right the first time. So let's start with Mr. Millsap. Here's the question that you all will get. Do you believe the amount of emphasis placed on illegal immigration and drug smuggling through Pinal County has been too much, not enough, or right on target?
Good question. One of the things that I've done in my career is I've investigated and dealt with a lot of issues within policing departments. And one of the things I've done is I've requested information from the Pinal County Sheriff's Office pertaining to that particular information. According to what's in the files, 11,678 911 call hang-ups had occurred in a 12-month period. During that particular time, there were approximately 115 calls, responses by police officers. That was an average of 8.2 areas within Pinal County. Now, there were 1,154 call responses. There were only 93% of hang-ups that had occurred. Now, why is that important? There are two corridors right now in Pinal County that need attention to that detail, and I'll talk about that later.
Mr. Taylor, the question.
How long do we get to?
Yes, ma'am. Could you repeat it, please?
I would be happy to. Okay. Do you believe the amount of emphasis placed on illegal immigration and drug smuggling through Pinal County has been too much, not enough, or right on target?
I believe that the current time has been right on target. We're still waiting for a final word from the Congress and the administration to give us final destination how we need to clear the identification check and the drug smuggling down the Pinal County. Pinal County has the Maricopa PD, and it also has the Sheriff Department interacting with that. So at this particular time, I would say that we're right on point till we get a clear definition of what's going on with SB 1070 to make sure that the law enforcement officers are right on target of what they're doing.
Thank you. You're up, Mr. Bearup.
All right, thank you. I believe that from the evidence that I've seen, that because of SB 1070, there's been a tremendous reduction in illegal immigration. Now, maybe we don't feel it here, but I think it's important that every person in this county receive protection. I believe that it's important that the Sheriff's Office not neglect one person that pays taxes in this county by focusing on one specific area. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to sit down and look at it, and everything that I've found so far shows that there is a reduction that is there because of the economy, because of SB 1070, and because of some of the other issues, the enforcement that the federal government has put there. How much time? Am I done? Oh, okay. Anyway, so I think that what we need to do is look at every part of that and then make some adjustments if that's what's necessary. The Vico Valley is a popular... Thank you.
Arnson, question to you.
Thank you. As a former chief of police at the Gila River Indian community, I can tell you that the drug cartels, the illegal activities that are coming through this county are continuing. And I can tell you that I put together a border protection unit with tactical officers, with the proper training to keep the border of Gila River safe. That's what I want to do as sheriff. It's important that we understand what's going on our national borders. In fact, that's just where I came from the last 2 weeks, was with the Department of Homeland Security. I'm in the United States Naval Postgraduate School studying Homeland Security. And I understand the importance and the impact here to you individually as citizens. I have the experience to deal with that. I want to tell you that I am a proponent and a strong supporter of Senate Bill 1070.
Thank you. Thank you. I started with the sheriff's office in '93 and worked my way up to bureau commander. I can tell you, with the changes that have just occurred with SB 1070 and the Supreme Court making their decision, nothing has changed since 1993. We're actually back to where we started. Do we need more enforcement on illegal immigration here in Pinal County? Absolutely, but we need it right here on our streets, in our own backyard, to keep our children and our grandchildren safe in your home. Do we need to focus out there in the middle of the desert all of our resources? Absolutely not. We need to bring those resources right back here to your town, to your city, to protect you. A lot of this illegal immigration stuff that's been going on has caused a lot of burglaries in your community. We need to focus on that. We need to protect your homes. If an illegal breaks into your home, I will have them arrested and booked into Pinal County Jail.
Sheriff, question to you.
And ask that question to Pat and Penny Murphy, who have family right here in Maricopa. Ask that question of Jay and Glenda Stewart, Nancy Henderson, who had her home broken in, who had the guns from her home stolen, who've had supplies, batteries, clothing items to resupply lookouts for the cartels. Ask citizens who I swore an oath to protect if there's enough emphasis on this issue. This past year, we had 123,000 illegals that were apprehended just by the Border Patrol in the Tucson sector, where you folks are sitting right now. And that's a representation of just one out of every possible 3. Is the border more secure than ever before, as Secretary Napolitano says? Clearly not. And when we together, not just us, not to the detriment of patrol, and I wish candidates would understand this, that we received $500,000 to pay deputies in partnership with our local law enforcement partners to enforce all the laws. Thank you.
Next question, we're going to start with Mr. Taylor. What would your top 3 priorities be as sheriff of the Pinal County Sheriff's Office?
I think the number one top priority is to have an audit. That would be one of my first things, to have an audit of the Pinal County Sheriff's Department. Number 2 would be to gather all the deputies together along with the chief deputy officers to find out what is really going on in Pinal County. I'll be coming to Pinal County as your new sheriff, so I have my ideals, and you have the officers and deputies that have their ideals, and they know what's going on because they're in the field every day. They're dealing with the community, they're dealing with the public, they're dealing with the people in the jail, they're dealing with everybody. A lot of times that stuff don't get back to the sheriff. So as sheriff, I would have a weekly meeting with my chief of deputies to find out what is exactly going on. And then take it from there and move forward. So you have to have some, to answer that question, I would have to do that. And then just move forward from there and see actually what the real problems are in Pinal County to make Pinal County a safer place for the people in Pinal County.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bearup.
The top three, number one would be, as Kevin said, to audit the entire financial system of the sheriff's office. I want to know where all the money's gone. I want to know what has been going on and how it's been moved around and what the priorities have been. I'm going to establish my own priorities within the sheriff's office. I want to develop a team from people that are currently within the sheriff's office to give them an opportunity to come up through the ranks. I also want to look at bringing other people that might have served, that want to come back because they are good people. I also want to evaluate every area of the sheriff's office to see what is important, and the number one priorities that we would have with that is identifying areas that we need to correct.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Arnson.
I have a 180-day action plan. That action plan is filled with about 13 to 15 key elements that I will address. Having been a chief of police, having worked the ranks from an officer all the way through to chief of police, I understand how to run an agency. And I understand how to be fiscally responsible with your funds, with the taxpayer funds. Accountability is huge. Restoring dignity and integrity to the office of sheriff is going to be key. Bringing morale back to the officers, imposing a 120-day administrative investigation moratorium. So 120 days we have to investigate an officer. After that, if we don't have it, we don't have it. They come back to work, those kinds of things. And provide quality public safety at a reasonable price. So I've heard a lot about doing more with less. We have to make sure that we're meeting your needs. I have the professional standards and competency to do just that.
Thank you. Mr. McClaren.
I have nearly 2 decades of law enforcement service right here in Pinal County, supervisory position and command position. I'm going to book bad guys into your Pinal County jail. I really don't have time to book TV time on Fox News. I'm going to book the bad guys that break into your home, folks. That's what I'm going to do. The second item I'm going to do is I'm going to bring community policing back to Pinal County. It's disappeared. We've got posse members that want to go work for Joe Arpaio now because they're not being taken care of at the sheriff's office. That needs to change. The third item is basic law enforcement. That's what we need in Pinal County. We need a sheriff that's going to take care of the bad guys, lock them up into your Pinal County jail, ensure that your money is taken care of. I will be a good steward of your taxpayers' money and not go over budget. I worked for the sheriff's office about 16 years total. We were never over budget.
Sheriff Babeu, if you'd like a 45-second rebuttal on the Fox News comment.
Well, I'd like to answer the question, and I can absolutely add to Jack's comments. First, we've been focused on performance and results. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Our budget is balanced, and in fact, we have nearly $2 million of additional monies after all of our obligations have been met. And we focused on training, we focused on new equipment, and we focused on technology to ensure, just like the military, 20 years in the reserve component, being the only one serving as a commanding officer, leading 700 active duty soldiers and airmen. The same principles have effect here in a paramilitary organization of nearly 700 employees. And we've been able to cut emergency response time in half. And the third thing that's vitally important is this young man from Maricopa sitting in your front row, Lando Voiles. We need a new county attorney in Pinal County. The past 2 years, 61% of violent felons have either been released or been given probation. That's unacceptable. A sheriff needs a partner. And I'm going to have that partner in Lando Voiles, who he and his wife, Tiffany, and their family live right here in Maricopa. That's vitally important to improve public safety for our families. So victims do not be denied their justice, and criminals pay a penalty for their crimes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Millsaps, your question to you.
Yes. The 3 things I would focus on are leadership, morale, and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Sheriff's Office current strategic business plan. It's incomplete since 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I plan to bring to the sheriff's office is this: a strong community problem-solving oriented program. For a raise of hands, how many of you believe in good customer service? That's what it's all about. A former Department of Justice federal law enforcement agent went to the sheriff's office requesting for information as a citizen and did not get the information that he was seeking. Now, transparency is one of the biggest problems within the sheriff's office, with any agency. Now, I came from the U.S. Department of Justice. That's a part of the program. Leadership, accountability, and morale. That's what it's going to take, and a stronger business plan. Mike Tyson once said, if you don't have a plan, you're going to get hit, and you're going to get hit hard.
Go to our next question, and we'll start with Mr. Bearup. The question is, in your view, has the sheriff's office changed for the better or the worse over the past 4 years?
I think that there are some things that have happened that are very good. I think that some of the people there have done an excellent job. Where I have a problem is this: it's commitment. Commitment. Paul decided to run for Congress, not be the sheriff of this county that he said that he was going to be. I believe that Paul sincerely tried to do the job that he thought was right. I don't argue that. But there are certain things that I believe are wrong. And that's transparency. And that's accountability. And it's responsibility. And I think it's incumbent upon anybody that sits in that seat to stand up and to do the things that are correct and open and honest to you, the taxpayer. You're the one that's got the bill. Whenever we're all gone, you're still going to be paying for whatever's there. Give service, customer service, and an opportunity to combine the citizens with the sheriff's office.
Sheriff Babeu, would you like your 45 seconds rebuttal?
Absolutely. The record is in direct contrast to what's these people. You can be a candidate and everybody's going to get soda pop and the water fountains. Everybody's going to get all these wonderful things. We've got a record of performance with our jail. Our jail is nationally accredited, the only jail in Arizona that obtained that accreditation. Our budget, and you're talking about transparency, the New Times. We all have seen the New Times. This is the government conspiracy newspaper. Have cited the Pinal County Sheriff's Office as the most transparent law enforcement agency. What do you not know about me and the Sheriff's Office, for God's sakes?
Thank you. Let's get back to the question, and we'll pick up with Mr. Arnson, the question again. In your view, has the sheriff's office changed for the better or the worse over the past 4 years?
Well, I certainly think that Sheriff Babeu's done some really good things within the county. I'm strong with the sheriff with Senate Bill 1070, but I think one of the reasons that I remain in this fight is because I believe that the sheriff, in his personal life, and regardless of what his personal life might be, but the opening of something that brought disrespect to the office was cumbersome for me. As a 20-year veteran of law enforcement, it's the badge that every officer wears. And so the question that I have to myself is it right for the sheriff to have a private life exposed in the manner that he did? Everyone has their rights, I believe that, but as a sheriff, I think our private life does matter a whole lot.
Like your 45 seconds?
Absolutely. If that's the reason you're running, you should re-examine your reasons for running. You know, I've had enough of the personal attacks, not just I've been through 10 of these debates. Exactly. And you know what? That people, performance and results, what I have done as a sheriff of this county, you don't become the national sheriff of the year because you go on Fox News. It's because we do a good job as a sheriff of this county. And the performance and results and the personal attacks is designed, has nothing to do with this race. And people here sit in judgment of me while they've declared personal bankruptcy in excess of $1 million, The majority of people on this stage have been fired from their jobs.
Let's get back to the original question now. Thank you, Mr. McClaren. Again, the question is, in your view, has the sheriff's office changed for the better or the worse over the past 4 years?
A little bit for the better, mostly for the worse, and I'll tell you why. I don't think the leadership at the sheriff's office is paying attention to the line troops. They've went to the administration and asked them and have begged them to take them off a 12-hour shift. The deputies are struggling out there. They're not having family time. They get home, they eat, they go to bed, they're right back on shift, and this was all started to help with response time in Santan Valley. But it's not helping in Maricopa, Oracle, San Manuel, Casa Grande. It's helping in Santan Valley a little bit, but the deputies are wore out. The sheriff's office talks about response time in Santan Valley and says that it's cut in half, but it's still 20 or 30 minutes up in Oracle and San Manuel. And that's the absolute truth. I get the emails all the time. It's still 20 minutes in Casa Grande. The sheriff lives in Santan Valley. That's his focus. It needs to be, we're all tax-paying citizens, it needs to be county-wide.
Thank you, Sheriff Babeu. The question to you.
Regardless what I say, I get criticized that I get the focus over here against illegal immigration. Now it's because I live in Santan Valley, I'm pulling all the deputies there. Well, look, I've redeployed limited patrol resources throughout the county, and we have a record of cutting emergency response time in half. The average for Pinal County is 8.5 minutes. It used to be 15 to 18 minutes, if a deputy even showed up. Talk to people down in Hidden Valley, in Stanfield, and talk about the improvements. Talk about the partnerships that we enjoy with law enforcement. It wasn't us that busted the largest drug bust in the history of Arizona. We brought 21 agencies, including Derek's, to the table, and we fought the Sinaloa cartel together. $2 to $3 billion here in our county, 108 weapons. Folks, that's results. And our budget is in balance. This is where it comes to performance, not all these niceties and talking in general, wishes.
Thank you. Mr. Millsap, the question. In your view, has the sheriff's office changed for the better or the worse during the past 4 years?
I think the sheriff's office has been stalemate. That's what I believe. The sheriff's office has boasted about a jail accreditation. I requested for information on the jail accreditation on inmate services policy. This is the inmate services policy. The date here says June 10, 2012. They received that jail accreditation before that. Ladies and gentlemen, I also requested information here pertaining to a public record request. 8 paragraphs out of 14 have been denied. It's hard for candidates to come here and state anything concerning what's going on in the sheriff's office. It's about community policing. It's about the people and the police working together. We cannot accomplish the mission of law enforcement without working together, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Taylor, the question to you. In your view, has the sheriff's office changed for the better or the worse over the past 4 years?
I believe the past 4 years, to my knowledge, the sheriff's department has been idle. What I mean by that, I think there's probably some more positive things that the sheriff department can do, such as getting out in the community, seeing what's going on in the communities, having the deputies get out of their vehicles and find out what's going on. It was just like if you remember back in the day where we had the school resource officers go to the schools and find out what's going on with the kids. Well, the kids will tell you. If you have a deputy that come in your neighborhood every day, somebody's going to stop and talk to that deputy and say, hey, there's something going on and you guys may want to check out. So I believe that if the new administration that's coming in the first of the year, get out and make that communication with the sheriff's department, I think the sheriff's department will be a better place, and I think the community will be much better, and a lot of people will open up and tell everybody what's going on to make Pinal County a better place to live.
Thank you very much.
So to start with Mr. Arnson on this question, how would you work with the Pinal County Board of Supervisors to create a budget for the Sheriff's Office?
First off, I truly believe in my heart that the sheriff is a reflection of the citizenry. And even though I am a strong conservative Republican, I serve the people in Pinal County, and not everyone is Republican. There's independents, there's Democrats, and there's others that don't vote. I will stay within my platform, my conservative beliefs, but there has to be some type of flexibility. And the only way to do that is break down the wall, break down the barriers, be a human being, establish rapport with those supervisors. What I'm seeing is a sheriff right now aligning himself with a select few. And the question is why? Are we stacking it in favor of one party or another? As a strong conservative, I think that there's problems with that. But as your sheriff, I will work with the County Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McClaren, question to you.
Thank you. While at the sheriff's office, back in '93, our sheriff then had a difficult time working with the Board of Supervisors. So we drove around with patrol cars with the mufflers falling off because the Board of Supervisors wouldn't give the sheriff's office any money, because there was that battle constantly. And there's a few retired deputies and lieutenants in here that, mark my word, they know I'm telling the absolute truth. Well, it's happening today that the sheriff cannot get along with the Board of Supervisors, so the sheriff's office, the deputies that are responding to your calls to protect you and your children, are not getting the resources they need because there's this constant battle. That needs to stop. When I worked at the sheriff's office, I never had a problem working with the Board of Supervisors and working out the budget issue. We were never over budget during that time. Thank you.
Sheriff, a 45-second rebuttal and then your 1-minute response.
I get along with most people, and when politics gets in the way, and this is where, perfect example, we were funded at $1.78 for a gallon of fuel. Who here in the audience pays $1.78 for a gallon of fuel? You would like to, but we don't. And it's not the president's fault. It's not my fault. What do we park the cars and not respond to emergencies? And this is where it's turned into, how can we poke the sheriff in the eye? And it's like, doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, I serve as a sheriff. And if anybody stands as well, and I'm not taking away from anybody here, for civil and equal rights, it is I. And I just want people that want to push in the same direction to improve public safety. Now, $2.5 million in vehicles. You got candidates up here saying that we're being denied of things. For the last 3.5 years, we've received $2.5 million to improve our fleet. We have close to 700 employees. The Board of Supervisors and I, even though at times there's conflict, have still been able to provide the resources. We had $7 million in grants in 1 year alone to buy not only new weapons, ballistic vests, radios. The governor and the legislature has allocated over $2 million, separate and apart from any other law enforcement in the state, because of my cooperative relationships with them. And they have honored the fact that we have stood up and said, give us the tools and equipment to fight these cartels, to protect our families and our citizens. We have 2 helicopters and a Piper Super Cub. We're the only law enforcement agency that has these air assets, and Pinal County taxpayers paid nothing for those. We did in our state taxes, but the governor gave us those resources. And thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Millsaps, question to you.
I forgot the question.
Absolutely.
No, I'm just kidding. Actually, okay. What I would do is this. You have to work internally with the budget. One thing I learned in the Marine Corps is to do more with less. That's the concept. If I'm handed $50 million, I'm going to work with $50 million. And how do you do that? You do things like you increase reserve units. You bring in staff who are volunteers to the department. You create an atmosphere within the department that can deal with what the function of the budget is. Going green technology, bringing in hydraulic fuel systems for the vehicle to decrease the corporate average fuel economy for the vehicles. So if you look at the issue of 1,564 responses to hang-ups, I would take a look at implementing a 311 system. And that 311 system is utilized by LAPD, NYPD, and many other departments. That can decrease the budget.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor? The question to you again, how would you work with the Board of Supervisors to create a budget for the Sheriff's Office?
Well, I believe we all have to get along. Right now, I don't see it. But basically, you do have to work with the people that you're elected in office with. You have to have a working relationship with those people. Those people, you're not going to get along with everybody in office. You're not going to be approved for everything that you ask for. But if you have the justification, if you have the paperwork to follow it up, you're going to be able to get the money you're going to ask for. You're going to have to make note of why you want it and where it's going to be used for, and use it for what you need it for, not to go off on something else. So as me being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, if I go over budget or anything that I do, my 50 to 60 employees don't eat, and they're mad at me. So I have to run a budget, I have to run it tight, and I have to be responsible for the money that is given to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bearup, question to you.
Well, number one, I plan to work with the Board of Supervisors very closely. My responsibility is to adhere to the budget that is set. I do have a discrepancy of $1.78 per gallon. Something that was forgotten was it was supplemented with almost a little over $500,000 in additional funds. So it's not true whenever we talk about $1.78 per gallon, okay? So with the Board of Supervisors, we have a responsibility as adults to sit down and work out the problems. Everybody here has a budget of some kind. If you don't, you're going to go to jail for writing bad checks. What I want you to do is to stop and think for a minute. Those people are elected by you. Whether we agree with them or not, we must have checks and balances in our administration, in the service to the community. So I work with them.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Babeu, 45 seconds on the fuel cost.
Well, the fuel costs, there was much ado made about the sheriff's $900,000 over budget. Well, guess where that is? That's exactly what this discussion is. We were budgeted at $1.78. They've never provided a supplement for that this year. They did in past years, but this is where they set it up. Why is this an issue this year? Because it's an election year. How can we make the sheriff look bad? In addition, there was a $450,000 contract, an agreement with the labor organization and the sheriff's office. The budget goes from July 1 to June 30th. We all know that. They had an agreement in August with the employees of my office, and it cost $450,000. They never gave me $1 for that. So this is their fictitious budget gap, and it's false.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go into the questions that were submitted by the candidates for the fellow candidates. For this portion of the event, we're going to split it up between the Republicans and the Democrats. So we're going to start with the two Democrats here. We have a question from Glenn Millsaps, directed towards Kevin Taylor. That question is, Mr. Taylor, have you ever fought to end corruption? And if so, what did you do to end it when confronted with said corruption?
Can you repeat that, please?
Absolutely. Have you ever fought to end corruption? And if so, what did you do to end it when you were confronted with it?
Nothing. To answer your question, nothing. Because I was never involved in any corruption at all.
Thank you, sir. A question for Mr. Millsaps. In your eyes, what is the balance between a politician and a law enforcement official when it comes to having an effective sheriff?
Well, the first thing is that I'm not a politician, and it's obvious. And one of the things that I believe is the balance between a politician and a law enforcement official is it doesn't exist. I was in the United States Marine Corps. When I was given an order, I took that order and I went with it. If I had troops who need to be taken care of, they were taken care of. If there were things that need to be resolved with higher levels, it was taken care of. There was no argument. There was respect, honor, courage, commitment. There were those type of ethos that existed between an individual responsible for an organization and one from one level to the next. Now, going to the Board of Supervisors is not going to be an issue with me. I'm a young man. First thing I have to do is respect them because they're my elders. So, but it's going to be clear that my relationship with them is going to be a professional-based organization, a professional-based concept.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move into questions from the Republican candidates. We have a question from Mr. McClaren, and this question will be asked of the three fellow Republicans. Mr. McClaren asks, and we'll start with you, Mr. Bearup, what makes you uniquely qualified to be the next Pinal County Sheriff?
Because I bring things to the table that the other candidates do not have. I've got experience in law enforcement. I've got experience at the grunt level, if you will, on the streets. I've got experience at the senior level of management within the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I've been elected city mayor as a strong mayor where I had to prepare the budget and I had to adhere to the budget. I also believe that I have the educational background to be able to do it. I have the ability of bringing people together at the table without looking at people in a prejudicial fashion. To sit down that we're all working hard to try to make things work the way they're supposed to. Our responsibility is to you guys, as I said. I am a type of person, I want to be transparent in all that I do. I want an open door. I want to be able to go and to do the things that I believe are important to do. That's what I'm going to bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Arnson, the question to you. Would you
Thank
like to repeat it?
Thank you. Folks, I have 20 years in law enforcement. I graduated the academy in 1992 at Alita. I've risen through the ranks from officer all the way to chief of police most recently. I speak fluently the Spanish language. My grandfather was born in Mexico, yet I'm a very strong supporter of Senate Bill 1070 because it does affect how we live here in this community. I understand, having served 15 of my 20 years in my career here in Pinal County, I served as a gang sergeant, and I dealt with a lot of the issues locally here in Maricopa. I have the acumen to do what it takes to be an effective leader. I'm a proven leader, and I want to be your sheriff. I bring education, master's degrees, and those types of things, family values. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Babeu.
Well, it starts with being a police officer. Some of us up here haven't been. Graduated #1 from the Law Enforcement Academy at Aaliyah in Phoenix. And more importantly than that is to be voted as the exemplary officer by all of my peers. And as a Chandler police officer, always having lived in Pinal County, in the performance of my duty, had the privilege to be awarded 2 life-saving medals. And 20 years of service in the military, served a tour in Iraq. I was an Army major, retired now, and I commanded soldiers on the border. If anybody knows a lot about the border and what it takes to secure the border, I lived there. I commanded soldiers there. Of the 9 sectors from California to Texas, we achieved more than double the success of any other sector, 97% reduction. And what makes me uniquely qualified, separate than all these other candidates to be the sheriff, I am the sheriff.
The next question submitted by Mr. Arnson. As sheriff, do you feel your personal and private life should reflect an even higher standard of ethics, morals, and values than those of whom you have stewardship over? Mr. McClaren, we'll start with you.
Thank you. As a law enforcement officer for nearly 2 decades, I don't have a private life. I live in a glass house. I was your elected constable in Santan Valley, Apache Junction, and Gold Canyon. I was an elected official. I still live in a glass house as an elected official. Bottom line, if I mess up in my private life, it's going to affect me in my public life representing you. The bottom line is our top leaders in law enforcement need to be above reproach in everything they do in their private life. Because the bottom line is we don't have a private life, folks. If the top law enforcement leader here in Pinal County has bad judgment, How can he hold his staff accountable? How can he hold his detention officers accountable if they do what the top law enforcement officer did, or the deputies? Can't happen.
Sheriff Babeu, the question to you.
Well, the voters have the last say, and this is 2012. And as any American who, and I ask you personally, how I want to be judged is by my performance and by my results. The same way you or your brother, your sister, your children in America, that the differences among us is the strength of our country. That's the promise of our Constitution. And that you are judged by the value you add in America. And I have worked hard. In fact, I have had to work harder my entire life to prove my value and my worth. And as the sheriff of this county, that we have benchmarks of measurement to show that we've done exactly that. I am proud to serve as your sheriff. The men and women who serve in our office, I couldn't be prouder of the work that they do. We're going to continue doing that because I believe that the voters on August 28th will see who has the last say. It's the people we serve.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bearup, the question to you, I can repeat it if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead.
As sheriff, do you feel your personal and private life should reflect an even higher standard of ethics, morals, and values than those of whom you have stewardship over?
Totally. I believe that we have a responsibility to be honorable, ethical, have integrity, and do the things that we're supposed to do as leaders. We are not supposed to go out and have our private life affected as we stand before people and young people throughout this county as a representative. My responsibility, number one, is to God. And I stand firmly in that conviction. As a Christian man, I don't judge anybody about what they do because they've got the problem, they got to deal with him. My responsibility, though, is to you, the public, to stand up, to show transparency in everything that I do. If you want to know what I've done, some of the things that people have accused me of, I will give you the truth, the final truth, and the whole truth. Because there's always that saying, the rest of the story.
Thank you, sir. The next question comes from Sheriff Babeu. We'll start with Mr. McClaren. What is your thought about deputy staffing levels and what actions are needed in the next 4 years for staffing throughout the sheriff's office?
Bottom line, we need more deputies. And what's unfortunate, this last board hearing to put the budget in place for the sheriff's office, our sheriff didn't ask for any more deputies. Why? It's beyond me. What has happened over the last 4 years, or 3.5 years, instead of bringing more deputies on board to answer your calls for service, your emergency calls to your schools to protect your children, everybody in the upper echelon has got a pay raise. The deputies haven't had a pay raise in 4 years. You heard the Board of Supervisors candidates up here letting you know that they haven't had a raise. They need a raise. Everybody else upstairs got a raise, and that's uncalled for. We need to take that money from upstairs, bring it back down to your street level here so we can answer your 911 calls, your emergency calls, and protect you, and that's what police officers are paid to do.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Babeu, you have 45 seconds rebuttal.
There's over 100 people in Pinal County government that earn over $100,000, not in the sheriff's office. Folks, there needs to be reforms in county government. This is where I've been advocating for new supervisors that lower property tax rates, that lower impact fees, because the government's upside down. And when you're looking at spending, that not only we're in balance, the supervisors are building new offices for them at $6.2 million when, again, we're not funded for fuel. And we have a zero-based budget. This is in policy, that it's a directive to all elected officials and department heads. I'm shocked that the candidates aren't aware of that you're not to go above, and in fact, there's cutbacks. There's been 160 people laid off.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go next to Mr. Bearup for the question. I'll repeat it for you. What are your thoughts about deputy staffing levels